The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeremy Sung from the IEA. Just letting you know that we're going to start in a couple of minutes. We'll allow a few more people to turn up, and then we'll kick off. Thank you. Okay, welcome everybody to this webinar for the launch of Energy Efficiency 2019. This is the IEA's flagship report tracking trends in energy efficiency that we publish yearly. My name is Jeremy Sung, and I'm an analyst in the Energy Efficiency Directorate or Division of the IEA. I'm joined by my colleagues Brian Motherway, the head of the Energy Efficiency Division, Kathleen Gaffney, a Senior Program Manager in the division, and Joe Ritchie, another analyst in the division. So we're delighted to have you with us today for the launch of our report. Before we get started, a few little housekeeping things to note. I see some of you are already actively using the chat window to post questions, and we would encourage you to do that. At the end of the presentation that Brian is going to deliver, we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll be drawing from the chat window to answer your questions. So please make use of that rather than the audio. I'd ask that you keep your microphones muted to avoid any feedback issues throughout the presentation. And like I said, we'll instead answer your questions via the chat window, so please post them there. If you're having any issues with hearing us though, let us know, and I've seen one question come up there about that, so we'll do our best to address that audio issue. And aside from that, we can get started. So I'd like to introduce Brian Motherway, the head of the Energy Efficiency Division here at the IEA, to get started on our key messages.
Thank you, Jeremy, and hello to you all. Thanks for joining us today. It's a big day for us here in the IEA for energy efficiency. We have launched the 2019 Energy Efficiency Report. Hopefully you can see our screen there, which gives you a link to where you can find the report. It's free to download, and our website also gives some key messages there and all the main facts and charts from that. You can find that at iea.org/efficiency2019. And I'm going to talk you through some of the main highlights now, and then we'd happily take your questions and answer anything we can. So first of all, an overview of some of the key messages that you'll see in this year's Energy Efficiency Report. First of all, if you've been on social media today looking at any of our feeds, you'll have seen that the key headline is that we are getting concerned that efficiency progress continues to slow down across the world. We'll get into detail of that. We are wasting opportunities to be more efficient and to reduce costs and emissions. And that is something that's of significant concern to us here in the IEA. We examine in our report in some detail why this slowdown is happening, and I'll tell you some of the main reasons we see behind that. But we also look at some of the benefits energy efficiency is bringing, because it's worth reminding ourselves that while progress is slowing, the world is still becoming more efficient, and that's bringing many environmental, economic, and social benefits that we quantify in the report. However, much more is possible. As we demonstrated last year in our report, the world could be hitting an annual progress rate of 3% improvement in global energy intensity. That's still very possible based on technologies that are not only available today, but are fully cost effective. And we discussed the kind of policy actions required to deliver that. And particularly as governments do look at policies available to them to enhance energy efficiency, a key domain is the emerging opportunities associated with digital technologies. And this year, for the first time in Energy Efficiency 2019, we explore in some detail how digitalization is changing energy efficiency, what it might look like in the future, and probably most importantly, the kind of responses and policy actions governments should be considering now to make sure they reap the benefits of digitalization. So that's an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. First of all, as highlighted already, and you'll have seen this in other IEA publications, 2018 showed some worrying trends in global energy patterns. First of all, it was the fastest growth in overall energy demand in the decade. We saw that particularly in the largest economies, as you would expect, the United States and China, between them accounting for 60% of the global growth in demand in 2018. And of course, that led to record levels of emissions and the fastest growth in emissions for quite some time, all of these worrying patterns. Underpinning this trend, of course, is the fact that energy efficiency improvements are slowing down. Now, to track that, among other ways, we look at primary energy intensity, which is how much energy the global economy uses in primary terms to produce each unit of GDP. We track this over a long period of time, and we see that since 2015, we've been seeing a steady but very measurable decline in progress in terms of annual energy efficiency improvements. And most specifically, the economy of the world in 2018 improved its energy intensity by just 1.2%, as against a high of almost 3% in 2015, and as against a rate that I've already said we have shown is eminently possible year on year in terms of 3% annual improvements, which we think should be the global ambition for energy efficiency. So, in the context of this slowdown, we want to examine exactly what is happening that is causing energy efficiency progress to move less quickly than it has in the past. And we look at this across a number of dimensions, and I'll just highlight some. First of all, we look at some short-term factors that have affected efficiency progress in the last year or two. Secondly, we look at some medium-term broader trends that are affecting global economy and its energy demand patterns. And then we look at some of the policy progress, which in summary is not moving as fast as it needs to keep up with the other pressures that are pushing demand upwards. So first of all, looking at some of the short-term trends that have affected efficiency progress in the last year or two. There are certain key energy-intensive sectors that have increased their activity in the last year or two, and they have an impact on global energy demand. One worth highlighting is that steel manufacture in China, it being such a large sector that it alone accounts for 4% of global final energy demand. Now, after a couple of years of flat activity, 2017 and 2018 saw quite significant growth in the amount of steel produced in China, hence leading to higher levels of energy demand and also more energy intensity. And that, again, China's steel sector is so big that a movement like that shows up on the global figures. The second factor I'll just mention briefly is weather patterns. Of course, weather patterns vary each year. In the last couple of years, we've seen a couple of weather anomalies or exceptional patterns that have caused energy demand to go up. One I'll highlight is that in the US, in 2018, there were a couple of months that were significantly colder than the previous couple of years, as represented by the blue bars on this chart here, and that led to very significant increases in gas demand for residential heating in the US. There were other anomalies around the world, such as warmer summers in certain parts of the world that led to higher cooling usage, and colder winters in other parts of the world that led to higher heating demand. So we see these short-term patterns across the last couple of years that have had quite a significant impact on recent energy demand and energy efficiency patterns. If we move to broader societal trends, though, I think what's really probably the most important and most troubling trend we are noticing in energy efficiency and energy intensity is we're seeing a battle being played out between structural and societal trends against the gains that we are making in technical energy efficiency through more improved energy technologies, better built buildings. All of these things are helping, but they're not keeping up with wider trends that lead to stronger growth and lower efficiency. And let me demonstrate this. First of all, the bars you're seeing now show how energy efficiency has changed year on year at a technical level. So each year you can see that improvements in technical efficiency, whether that's a more efficient motor or car or building, each of these leads to energy savings that are measured here in global terms. Now, in certain situations, particularly earlier in the decade, we saw that structural effects, which includes shifts towards less intensive industries and other societal shifts, were actually greatly enhancing the impact of those technical efficiency savings, so that the overall savings in intensity were more than double. What has happened in the latter part of this decade is that trend has actually reversed, so that in recent years, structural change in terms of the overall patterns of the economies are actually blunting and reducing the savings made by the technical energy efficiency gains. And this is a very important pattern for us to observe, to see how technical efficiency is only part of the wider set of variables that impact on overall energy intensity and therefore the overall energy demand patterns of the world. And this shift in the last couple of years, where structural change is actually working against efficiency progress, is really quite significant. And let me show you just one example of that to illustrate it a little bit better. If we look at buildings, for example, and we look at factors influencing residential buildings use in the last few years, technical efficiency gains have reduced energy demand in buildings right across the world. And that's better built buildings, better windows, better insulation, better heating systems, better appliances. All of these things are reducing energy demand compared to what they would be otherwise. On the other hand, if we look at other societal trends regarding buildings, such as population, weather, and most significantly, more floor area per person, all of these things are pushing energy demand up and energy intensity up. So in other words, people are living in bigger homes, their occupancy rates are going down, they have more appliances that they're using more of the time, and all of this is swamping the technical efficiency gains we're making through the technologies themselves. And this is the pattern we see happening across the world that is really putting pressure on energy efficiency progress. In light of that, policy is really what matters, and the impact of policy to enhance energy efficiency is more vital than ever. And yet, in the last couple of years, we see that policy progress and relatedly investment are flat. In the last few years, both policy growth as measured by mandatory policy coverage and other indices you'll see in our report has more or less stayed flat in the last 3 or 4 years. And similarly, the total amount of money invested in energy efficiency right across the world has more or less stayed flat in the last 3 or 4 years. So when they are most needed, our responses to enhance global energy efficiency are actually not growing at the rate they should and the rate they could. Now, what does this mean? This slowdown is a lost opportunity for the global economy, and we measure this through what we call the energy productivity bonus. So first of all, every year as the world becomes more energy efficient, we all save money. Economies save money as a whole, they become more productive. We as consumers save money, businesses become more competitive. And one way of measuring this is to look at the energy efficiency productivity bonus associated with enhanced efficiency. And we can see that every year, literally trillions of dollars are being added to our global productivity because we are extracting more value from every unit of energy that we use. However, the rate of improvement has declined, as you can see, and if you compare those numbers compared to what they would have been had we stayed at the more or less 3% rate we reached in 2015, we are now achieving less than half of the total economic gains that we could be achieving in 2018 because of enhanced energy efficiency. And that's the real global cost of the slowdown in our improvements in energy efficiency. Having said that, it's worth remembering that efficiency is still bringing benefits, and in our annual report, Efficiency 2019, you can see a wide range of benefits quantified. One that I'll just highlight here today is in energy security. When countries use less energy, those that need to import their energy can obviously reduce those imports, and we measure those in a lot of regions across fuels. Taking oil itself, for example, Japan imported 20% less oil last year than it would have were it not for the efficiency gains made in recent years. Many other energy importing countries also made similar gains. Putting a value on this, both Japan and China each reduced their oil imports by the equivalent of $20 billion last year because of the gains they have made recently in energy efficiency. Similarly, in greenhouse gas emissions, we see that efficiency has been a very large driver in lowering global emissions. You can see here that the actual global emissions for the last couple of decades compared to what they would have been if we hadn't made progress in energy efficiency. We can see the gap is very significant in terms of the emission savings that efficiency is already contributing. But we can also see that were we staying on the path of 3% annual gains, we would already be seeing emissions turn down just due to energy efficiency savings alone. And that's the lost environmental opportunity that goes with our slowdown in efficiency progress. Now, I mentioned at the start that as we call on policymakers to enhance their action on energy efficiency, we particularly draw attention to the emerging opportunities and new issues arising from digitalization, by which I mean the fact that there are so many more digital technologies out there, so much more connectivity, so much more data, artificial intelligence, and all that goes with that. Of course, on the one hand, all of these extra devices and their connectivity could lead to increased energy use, but if exploited correctly and with the right policy environment, they also offer tremendous opportunities to enhance global energy efficiency. First of all, the amount of opportunity out there in the form of digital assets, be they technologies, algorithms, or data sets, is growing very, very rapidly. And even just despite growth in recent years, we expect that in the next 6 to 8 years, the number of digital devices deployed on the planet could double if current trends continue. And all of these devices represent opportunities for engagement for energy efficiency by putting people more in control, by connecting machines, technologies, algorithms, and control systems. And all of this, with the right policies, could really deliver very enhanced energy efficiency. Not only in terms of the end user devices, not only in terms of controlling existing devices better, but in thinking in a new way of thinking about energy efficiency in a more systems way. And let me illustrate what I mean by that. Up till now, if we think about the devices in our homes, each one has an opportunity to be more or less efficient. We could have a more efficient air conditioner if we wanted, a more efficient lighting system, more efficient appliances, and all of that is already possible and will continue to be possible. Digitalization, however, is already connecting those devices, often through maybe control via your smartphone or through a smart thermostat or other control systems where a whole house can now be optimized. They can share energy, time of use of efficiency starts to become an interesting concept. All of this is starting to emerge. But what's really the next wave, in our view, is to think about that in a broader system sense, where the smart home becomes part of an overall smart grid, where supply and demand are both part of a wider system of optimizing the use of our resources, optimizing the use of our infrastructure, making use of clean, cheap resources when they're available, optimizing efficiency when such resources are not available, and thinking then in the future not just of end-use efficiency, but of overall systems efficiency. In our view, this is the next phase of energy efficiency globally, but this will only become a positive opportunity if the right policies, regulation, and market design are in place. And I have to say that so far we see relatively little responsiveness from governments in terms of preparing for this new future. And therefore, for the first time ever in Energy Efficiency 2019, we published the concept of a policy readiness framework for being ready for digitalized energy efficiency. And we set out in some detail the kinds of policy dimensions that governments really need to be thinking about now if they want to not just avoid the risks of greater digitalization in energy efficiency terms, but exploit all the positive opportunities that come with that. And for us, this is a call to action to governments to start engaging with each other and with us and with all the stakeholders to look at how the next epoch of energy efficiency globally can be driven by the right policies to exploit the digital opportunity. So, in conclusion, some of the key messages from Energy Efficiency 2019 are, first of all, we see success in energy efficiency, but it's being eroded by wider trends and policy is not keeping up. As more than anything, Energy Efficiency 2019, our report, is a call to action for policymakers to take stronger actions among the available options that are already there for them to choose from today. This is because the slowdown is a lost opportunity, and we see financial losses, environmental losses, and societal losses from the fact that cost-effective solutions are available, but are not being deployed because the policies are not in place. In particular, as we look for the new policy opportunities, we call on governments to focus in particular on digital innovation and to think differently about energy efficiency of the future as supported by digitalization. I do want to say that the IEA continues to work on these topics. We have been looking at all of the opportunities around the way to get back onto a 3% annual improvement path and of all the benefits that go with that. I just want to highlight one particular example, which is our new Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency, which is working as we speak between now and next summer among a group of high-level influencers around the world who are considering what options can be taken to exploit energy efficiency more quickly, driven by government policy. So, before we turn to questions, I just want to involve you a little bit more. I want you to be aware that we are always interested in your views, so let's have a discussion now on this webinar. Contact us at any time at energy.efficiency@iea.org. We have a couple of webinars coming up that I think will be quite interesting to many of you, and we'll be publishing details via our web and usual social channels. So just later this week, we have a webinar on energy efficiency obligations. And next week, we have the next in our series of webinars on digitalization. And I hope you've seen from my presentation why we are focusing on digitalization. I do want to say to you as well that we very much welcome your inputs in support of the Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency. So if you go to our website on the link shown here on the screen, you can find out more about the Global Commission, and you can also engage with us by filling in a survey, giving us your views and sending us your opinions and ideas on how global energy efficiency can be enhanced. So this continues to be a global conversation. I hope I've shown you today why energy efficiency is so important and therefore why the slowdown is so worrying, and we look forward to continuing the discussion with you all.
Okay, so thank you very much, Brian, for that. And I've been seeing a lot of questions coming in during the presentation, so we'll try and line them up as they've come in the same order. And apologies if we don't get to every question, but we'll certainly got your details here so we can try and get back to you separately from this webinar if we don't get to your question this afternoon. Okay, so the first question I've got here is from one Philippe, and he asks how to encourage or foster energy efficient solutions in jurisdictions where state-owned utilities are suffering financially and the decrease in demand might have an impact on the business. Now, this is an interesting question. I'll answer this from a sort of general perspective beyond the perspective of a state-owned utility per se. Essentially, what's happening now is that business models are changing. So instead of selling megawatts, energy companies are realizing that they need to shift towards service-based models. So you're absolutely right that things like improved energy efficiency, which reduce demand, could have an impact on the traditional way of doing business. But that's what's changing now, and utilities are shifting towards service-based models. And you'll see one of the things we launched a commentary on last week was on the user-centric energy systems technology collaboration program, which is one of the IEA's 38 collaboration programs. And the work of that that collaboration program, one of the works that they're doing is exactly on this topic of user-centric and service-based business models for utilities to move away from traditional business models. So I would encourage you to look at the work of that TCP to find out more. We'll get to the next question now, which is from Tanili, who asks, do you count things such as emissions trading as energy efficiency policy? Look, this is something that we definitely do consider a policy that would drive energy efficiency. And that's been proven time and time again in many countries that have carbon prices or emissions trading schemes. Pricing carbon does have a big impact. So we don't explicitly cover that in the report. However, we do have a mention of the new South African carbon price that is having, we expect to have an impact on energy efficiency there. So what we do on a year-to-year basis is track key policy changes. And this year, there is a short mention of the carbon price in South Africa. But this is certainly something that we might consider doing in future reports, actually, expanding the number of and types of policies that we track, and definitely an ETS or a carbon price would be something that we would hope to get more information on. Our climate change team in the IEA also is tracking progress on carbon pricing. So this is something we'd probably collaborate with that team. Okay, so the next question we have here is whether the IEA is capturing the behaviour patterns of people on energy efficiency. For example, if a family start using LEDs instead of a conventional incandescent bulb, would there be some sort of rebound effects? I think is what the question is getting at. Does anyone else in the team want to take that one?
No, sure. So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Joe Ritchie. I'm one of the energy analysts here in the Energy Efficiency Division. So in terms of some of the behavioural impacts, those are reflected in some of the structural factors, which Brian Motherway highlighted in his presentation. In particular, things like increased appliance ownership or changes in occupant behaviour, increasing floor area per person, or changes in the type of vehicle that is being used by consumers. Those sorts of behavioural changes put upwards pressure on energy use and are reflected in the structural factors that we take account of through our analysis that in the last couple of years have been increasing energy use. In terms of things like rebound effects, this is a question that we get a lot. From a historical point of view, our analysis has effectively the rebound effects baked in. So any rebound effect that might happen from a family converting, say, as you said in your question, from a complex fluorescent lamp or a halogen lamp towards an LED, that would be reflected in the energy use data that we analyse as part of our analysis. But in terms of obviously looking to the future, those sort of questions about rebound effects are ones that come up a lot in our modelling, and how you might gauge the impact of that and how you might analyse that is a very much debated area of discussion. But it is obviously something, as I said, that in our historic modelling, those rebound effects are baked into the energy use data that we analyse.
Okay, so the next question I'm going to skip to now is one from Praneeth, and Praneeth asks, what policies can drive investments in energy efficiency, and what is the role of the IEA in that, and can we make countries commit to investing in energy efficiency? And I thought I would hand this one to Kathleen.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So it's Kathleen here. I think that's a great question. It's a top priority in terms of some of our stakeholders too, especially and among the Global Commission members. You know, how can we finance the level of energy efficiency investment that's needed? So in terms of some of the financial mechanisms that we've been looking at, and some of them are profiled in this year's report and have been in previous reports. But I think we're focusing a lot on performance-based contracts, whether that's those that are traditionally thought about when you think of the ESCO market or the energy services companies, but also some more modern service-oriented contracts that would embed energy efficiency as a service in some kind of a supply contract or a hybrid that would get involved with installing energy efficiency measures at the same time as offering energy supply. So we're really trying to focus more of our analysis on these performance-based contracts, not just because there's been a lot of experience and they tend to have some evidence base to show, you know, what's working and what isn't, but in terms of where the market is moving, a lot of those digital technologies or those digital platforms that Brian was talking about and that the report kind of highlights, they definitely lend themselves to more and more of these performance-based financing models. So whether it's paying back a loan on your energy bill or your property tax, or whether it's taking out an independent loan with a private bank or a service provider. The fact that more and more digital tools and digital technologies out there and associated with those energy savings measures means that the risk from those investments is going to be reduced or made more transparent and then hopefully reduced over time. So we're really pushing more in the kind of performance-based contracting space now. So thanks.
Thanks, Kathleen. The next question now is another one from Praneeth. I've already read that one. This is from Charles, who asks about how much of the reduction in efficiency can be attributed to lower energy prices. For example, if energy prices had been higher, would efficiency have been greater? I'll hand that one to Joe.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thanks, Charles, for this question. It's one that we also get asked quite a bit. In the report, we don't put a exact number on the impact of energy prices, but it is fair to say that they have had an impact. And that's particularly been the case in the transport sector and in particular in passenger transport. So from about mid-2014 to about mid-2017, around then, we saw a period of low oil prices, and that obviously flowed through to lower gasoline or lower petroleum prices. And what that manifested itself in from our analysis is that it meant that road users and car owners felt more able to purchase a bigger car. So they moved from, say, things like hatchbacks or sedans to larger sport utility vehicles. And that resulted in them obviously having greater energy use, even though those SUVs are more efficient than they were in the past. Those cars are still more energy consuming than a smaller vehicle would be. So that's been an impact that we reflect in our structural factors, because people are shifting towards less efficient modes of transport, and they're doing so because they're more able to afford that, because in some countries their wages are higher, they're able to have more purchasing power, but they've also got lower oil prices, which means they can afford to run the car. And because they can afford to run the car, they also are driving it for longer, and they're driving it with fewer people in the car as well. And so lower oil prices have had an impact, and lower energy prices have an impact on energy efficiency, particularly because people are able to consume energy in a way that they previously might not have been able to afford to do so. And our analysis does indicate that that has had an impact. Another IA analysis that you will have seen recently also highlighted the impact that SUVs are having on the global emissions. In fact, I think after the power sector, they've been the single largest contributor to the increase in global emissions this past decade. And people's ability to afford SUVs is, as I said earlier, linked to the oil price.
I might just use that opportunity to skip ahead to one of the questions that come in from Jennifer, who asks about which structural changes are outpacing technical gains. And Joe just mentioned some of them there in the transport sector: larger vehicles, people driving for longer distances. The same is true in the building sector. Brian talked about in his presentation that people are buying larger houses, using their appliances more and having more appliances in those houses. And then in the industry sector, to answer your question there, what we've seen is a slowdown in the shift away from heavy industry to services-based industries, meaning that there actually is having more output from those heavy energy-intensive industries, such as the steel and cement sector. And as a result, you're getting an increase globally in energy intensity. So I hope that answers your question, Jennifer. Okay, the next question was from Praneeth, and it was, how do we cascade the technical disruptions in energy efficiency to various countries and incubate them to deliver larger gains? And he suggests a startup ecosystem to nurture this. Praneeth, I assume you're meaning basically technology transfer from developed to emerging economies, for example. Yeah, this is something that the IEA is definitely interested in. And on the policy front, this team, the Energy Efficiency Division, does a lot. We have a very successful training program called the Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies Program, or E4 for short. And we've trained over 1,500 people to date. And so that's really our attempt to try and make sure that policymakers across the world have the same skills and tools to try and increase energy efficiency and bring us back to the level that we need to be at to deliver on our goals for climate change and sustainability. But on the technology front, the IEA also works through the technology collaboration programs. I mentioned them earlier. We have 38 collaboration programs. You can find out more on the website iea.org/TCP. And basically that involves researchers coming together, a network of 5,000 researchers, to find breakthroughs in energy technologies on both the supply and demand side. And so that's definitely something that we're closely interested in at the IEA. I'm going to get to the next question now, which is from Ariel. He says, can you post the program agenda? Yes, we can do that. Skipping ahead then, the next question is from Mark, and it's on digitalization. And the question is, what about the consumption of the billions of devices and supporting cloud? How to control its consumption? So this is a very good question, and this is something we also are interested in knowing more about. We have looked at this in the report this year to some extent, and we also did a report in 2017 called Digitalization and Energy. Now, the issue, what we've highlighted in Chapter 2 of the report this year is that there has been significant growth in device ownership and use, and this is having an impact on demand. However, what we are also observing is that the efficiency of devices is improving, and our estimates are that on the whole, over the last, say, 3 to 4 years, consumption hasn't increased as fast as the growth in devices has. So that means that we are seeing some rather large gains in efficiency, and you can see examples of this, anecdotal evidence of this from things like server energy use is improving, and we're getting new scale servers that actually improve energy efficiency quite significantly. There's something on our Tracking Clean Energy Progress website of the IEAs that looks at server efficiency improvements. In the report itself, there's mention of Google's work on using artificial intelligence. This is Google DeepMind, their artificial intelligence division, to maximize the efficiency of their network of servers. So things are happening anyway, and perhaps it's because we are dealing with companies here that are at the cutting edge. They're finding ways to use their own technologies to improve their efficiency. So it's quite an exciting space to be in right now, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to highlight the potential of digitalization to improve energy efficiency, because it is happening out there, and more people should be aware of it. Okay, the next question we had here was on the Global Commission from Jennifer, and she asked, can you give us more details on the difference and how different stakeholders can feed in beyond the survey? Is there anything that we can say in addition to the survey?
Well, it's Brian here, and thank you for that question. The Global Commission, I think, is an important initiative this year because, as you've seen in this discussion, the opportunity for greater energy efficiency exists, and yet we don't see the progress that we would all like to see. And the gap seems to be around not just the design, but also the implementation of good policy. And so we want to put a focus on a high-level political discussion about how policies can be better designed and better implemented to have a stronger impact. And that's why we've recruited many people from around the world, including energy ministers, former ministers, CEOs of companies, thought leaders, and we're very keen to make sure that they have the best information in front of them. So already many hundreds of people have filled in the survey and we're very grateful for that we have online. You can use that survey as a way to contact us. If you want to contact us directly with additional information, please do. Our email address is energy.efficiency@iea.org, and we'd very much welcome your inputs. And in our role as Secretariat to the Global Commission, we will compile and consolidate all the information and put it in front of them. So we're very keen to get everybody's inputs, please.
Okay, thanks for that. The next question is from Norbert, and I think I'll take this one as a comment. It was that digitalization is a huge opportunity, but it can not only be approached from policy, but also is an opportunity for market-driven developments as it brings transparency in energy use. And that was a question that I think touched on in my last answer there, that a lot of this is happening from some of your major tech companies already, and they're not necessarily always being driven by policy. Some of it is just a pure economic incentive to do so anyway. So agree with you, Norbert. The next one is from Amit, who asks, every year I hear that energy efficiency measures are not progressing because of policy. What should be done, and what efforts should be made to ensure that this is accelerated in the next IEA report so that policy factors show a positive trend? Does anyone want to take that?
Thank you for that question. We do hope that some of the work we're doing at the moment through the Global Commission and also through this analysis and other initiatives that are underway, I think in our view there's a sense that governments are starting to realise that efficiency needs more attention, that sometimes it's the unsung hero of energy and climate policies, and as countries focus more on their energy transition goals and particularly emissions abatement goals, we see a growing realisation that efficiency has a stronger role to play. And our analysis that shows that savings could be increased to an annual intensity improvement rate of 3% just based on existing cost-effective technology, I think is waking some people up, and we are working directly with governments all over the world to help them understand. And I think learning from each other is a key dimension here, and that's why a key role is to help countries see what each other are doing, see what their peers and their regional neighbours are doing in terms of energy efficiency policies, so that we can all learn from the best practices around the world to globally enhance efficiency progress.
Okay, so the next question is, how does the IEA influence governments in developing countries like Indonesia to make policies for energy efficiency? I did touch on that a bit earlier. The main way that we're doing that through this division is our E4 program, Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies. And in Indonesia is one of the countries we work very closely with, actually. One of the things we're doing in Indonesia is working on a reporting system for industrial energy efficiency directly with the Indonesian government. And we've also been doing a bit of an experiment there with some web scraping to get information on appliance energy efficiency as well. So stay tuned for that. But yes, we completely acknowledge that energy use is growing very fast in emerging economies, and that's why they're a priority for us here at the IEA. Okay, the next one is from Sunny, who asks, it says, the digitalization of energy efficiency in the commercial sector can be achieved more quickly and at lower cost than in the residential sector. Will the IEA be providing policy guidance on which sectors should be prioritized for urgent action? That's an interesting question. We certainly aren't going to leave our work on digitalization with what we've presented in the market report. That was really just scratching the surface. We acknowledge that, and we have plans in the new year to expand the materials that we've provided online. You'll see case studies. You'll see much more information about much more information around the readiness for digital energy efficiency policy framework that we have presented for the first time in the market report. So definitely we'll be touching on that and getting a bit more flesh on the bones that are presented in the market report. Now on the question of priority sectors, I'd say we probably need to do a bit more analysis to be able to say definitively, but I can see where you're coming from. Certainly, if you're thinking about an individual building and digitalizing it and using its flexible demand resources, you're going to get much more bang for your buck probably from a single commercial building than trying to do the same for a number of residential buildings. So that it does probably make sense that you would tackle that sector of the building sector first. Okay, so the next question is, what is needed to mainstream energy efficiency projects so as to attract greater green financing support?
So this is Kathleen again. I guess it's a similar answer. I will always say when it comes to financing and how we can move more of the global financial resource to efficiency is we need to really do a bit more work on how to de-risk those investments and to aggregate them in packages that become more attractive. So, you know, there's a number of steps I imagine we can work with governments on, or work with some of the global institutions that have that type of climate financing available. But you know, and some of them, like the European Investment Bank and others, are out there now stating the direction they want some of that financing to go to prioritize efficiency. So I would say both, you know, putting energy efficiency on the menu of measures that financing like that can be made available for, providing some of the tools that are needed to make more of the risks associated with energy efficiency more transparent, and you know, make it so that we can reduce some of those risks through different types of calculation tools and things like that, and then providing once we have some uptake on some of those at the individual project level, providing some way to aggregate all of those investments to create more of a larger scale asset that could then be, comparable to some of the financial mechanisms available for other types of clean energy investment. So it's sort of trying to bring efficiency along the same journey as renewables, or even some of the other sort of smaller scale clean energy investments are getting some attention to.
Okay, the next question here is, how do you reconcile reducing energy use and energy access imperatives? I.e., do you see a future in which energy access is achieved for all, but we manage, thanks to EE, to reduce overall energy use as feasible? Look, the answer to that, I think, is we have to be positive and say yes, really. Energy access and energy efficiency are not in conflict. In fact, I think we would say energy efficiency is one of the key drivers or ways of achieving energy access. And there are various pieces of analysis we could show you that point to that. We haven't covered that explicitly in the report this year, but in previous years, the World Energy Outlook, for example, did a special on this issue, and energy efficiency is crucial to achieving access. Did anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Jeremy, that on Friday of this week, I think it is, that the World Energy Outlook is actually going to be releasing its Africa Outlook for this year. It's a special publication that focuses particularly on Africa. And without stealing too much of their thunder, I can tell you that energy efficiency and the impact of energy efficiency on, one, improving energy access whilst reducing the need for additional supply and distribution and transmission infrastructure, and improving affordability is quite central to Africa realising its potential in the future. And I think also, I mean, one of the things that in many emerging economies, that the idea of increasing energy access is obviously something that will be a goal that is being pursued. But energy efficiency is inherently a contributor to that, because if it costs less for a household to gain full energy access with efficient appliances than it does with less efficient appliances, and as I said, that improves the ability for governments, for utilities, and for other organisations to provide energy access to people that currently don't have such services, and to do so at lower cost. And so efficiency, therefore, is the essential ingredient, I suppose, to increasing energy access and realising 100% rates of access around the world.
Okay, so we've got 2 minutes left. We'll squeeze in 2 more questions. I see one here from Fidel, which is, how can we increase energy efficiency? Is it only through increasing end-use device efficiency, or are there other factors that can help? And I think that to quickly answer that one, definitely other factors can also help. In fact, what our analysis this year showed is that technical efficiency of specific end users is increasing quite well, but other factors are overwhelming its influence on global energy intensity. And so that points us towards potentially thinking about changing behaviour. And the IEA will be looking at behaviour change in more detail in 2020. And so stay tuned for that analysis. Okay, last question. I'll just have to go through the list of what's left. And I'm sorry if we don't get to all of your questions. We'll endeavour to get back to you offline. Something here. Okay. Do you think we've sort of answered that one? Sorry, I'm just going through this list of a long list of questions here. Okay, what about this? What impact do you think that the implementation of local electricity storage technologies could have on the overall energy efficiency of smart grids? Sorry.
I'll try a stab at that, just Kathleen. So it depends on what you mean by local. But if you mean behind the meter, or community orientation of storage, I think that's a key element to what we would include in a list of distributed energy resources, of which energy efficiency is part of. So we definitely see that's the way forward in some areas where reducing emissions is the policy aim. You have different mix of energy resources, and if you can marry storage with electrification, with energy efficiency and other types of demand shaping measures, then you can, in theory, optimize according to the emissions how much emissions you're going to be reducing at different points of time and different parts of the grid. So if you're talking about storage in conjunction with some of these other distributed energy resources, then we would definitely put energy efficiency in that mix. And I think that's one of the solutions that we're looking at a little bit more closely across the agency, because obviously that'll play into how we're working with our system integration renewables team, as well as some of the other the folks that are looking at storage as a technology option in general. So it's a good question and something we're hoping to do a little bit more work in terms of where efficiency fits in.
Great. Okay, so with that, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. But we thank you for all of your questions, and there was a lot more there that we can see coming up on the screen, so we'll endeavour to get back to you offline on those questions. Thank you very much for your participation and for spending the hour with us this afternoon. We would welcome any further feedback via the email address energy.efficiency@iea.org, and also don't forget to participate in our global survey as well. I think that's it, so thank you.